Minister, you'll be aware of the many families and homeowners who are left in limbo because neither the developer or the local authority are taking responsibility for infrastructure in their estate. Lighting, footpaths and road quality are deteriorating and nobody's stepping in. While this is a matter for each council, due to the capital expenditure required, many cannot afford these interventions. Would you be willing to put in place a specific funding stream to assist these families?
Thanks, Deputy. Mr. Burke.
Thank you. We're not going to thank Deputy Kearns for her question. The Planning and Development Act 2000, as amended, and the Water Services Act 2007 and 2018 set out statutory provisions relating to the taking in charge of housing estates by planning authorities and Irish Water where appropriate to do so. Section 180 of the Act sets out the process to be followed in relation to the taking in charge of housing estates where a development is considered to have been satisfactorily completed, as well as where it has not been completed to satisfaction of the planning authority. It is a matter for the relevant planning authority, as you quite rightly pointed out, to agree to taking in charge of any individual housing estate. When taken in charge of an estate under Section 180 of the Act, the planning authority agrees to take in charge the roads, footpaths, public lighting and open spaces associated with the development. With regard to water-related infrastructure, such as sewers, water mains or service connections within attendant grounds of a development, these are initially taken in charge by the planning authority, which must then be transferred over to Irish Water by ministerial order pursuant to Section 12 of the Water Services No. 2 Act 2013. Ultimately, progression of individual developments through the taking in charge process is a matter for the relevant housing developer, the residents in such developments and the relevant local authorities, following out the procedures set out very clearly in Section 180 of the Act. Under Section 30 of the Act, I, as Minister, and Minister O'Brien with responsibility, are precluded from exercising any power or control in relation to any particular case in which the planning authority or the board is concerned. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Kearns.
Minister, I appreciate that the Planning and Development Act locates this as a council issue, but that's of little consolation to the thousands of people affected. Families and homeowners that I've been in contact with in towns like Clonakilty, Kinsale and Skibbereen are being left in limbo, and somebody needs to step up to help them. The infrastructure in their housing estate is either deficient or deteriorating, and the original developer in many cases just is no longer around. The Council is refusing to take responsibility for the estate until existing issues, which would cost tens of thousands to rectify, are resolved. Currently, there is no way out for these families. After years of campaigning and in a piecemeal fashion, some of these issues eventually get solved. But the situation is compounded by the families having to pay property tax but not receiving the services that they need. That's not good enough, and as a Minister for Housing, what are you going to do to help resolve the issue?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Well, obviously there is provision in the Act for housing estates that have not been taken in charge in terms of what action the residents can do to compel the local authority to commence the process. It's up to the local authority then to judge the development in terms of the completion to the prescribed planning permission. We in this country, I suppose, over the last decade had to respond to in excess of 3,000 ghost estates and put in key public infrastructure to underwrite them, on foot of a huge recession in this country, that the economy crashed and the department had to grapple with. Now the process is in place in terms of the Act is very robust and strong, and essentially, to answer your specific question, the residents have a mechanism. They are very clearly set down in the Act in terms of the expiry of 4 years of the planning permission, where they can take action and request the local authority to take the estate in charge.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Kearns, final supplementary.
Minister, you have to appreciate the frustration of families in these cases because they're continually pleading for assistance, and too often the only solution proposed is for them to fund the works themselves, and then the council can take over. The problem is this system is set up to leave nobody responsible. Developers, councils, Irish Water, your department are all playing past the parcel. While families in some cases can't let their children out to play, or older residents can't walk because of the crumbling footpaths and broken lighting. This type of laissez-faire approach defines housing policy. This is a situation where you can make a concrete difference to families in residential estates across the country. So I'm also wondering what proactive measures you're taking to prevent this happening in the future. What regulation enforcement is in place to ensure developers put in place and maintain the infrastructure that they should?
Thanks, Deputy. Minister Burke.
Thank you. I think there are very robust mechanisms in place right now to ensure that the legacy of a decade ago... If you could let me finish, I would appreciate it. I didn't interrupt you. I said there's a number of issues in place right now to ensure that this does not happen again. I referenced that we had in this country almost 3,000 ghost estates, and we have changed the law to ensure that this does not happen again. You have mechanisms to ensure that developers have bonds in place that guarantee that planning permissions will be completed as prescribed, and the local authority has the independence to hold them to account on that. That process is very clearly set out in legislation. Also, in terms subsequent to that, in terms of the taking in charge process, is very clearly set out under the Act in terms of residents can request the local authority to take in charge in estates. We've had huge funding streams in the department over the last decade trying to respond to massive remediation plans in estates right around the country to put in infrastructure. But at the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the local authority to do so and hold developers to account who are meant to finish estates off to the level that is prescribed in the planning permission.
Thanks,